Hello, welcome to 15-Minute Consulting Best Practices. I'm Maria Isabel Rios. I'm joined today by Scott Thompson. Hello, Scott. Welcome.
Hello. I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Scott is CEO of Acceleration Point. Acceleration Point serves medical affairs organizations in pharma companies. Scott and his team have built an impressive consulting firm. But Scott is joining us because of what Acceleration Point has done beyond consulting, namely adding a very large and lucrative revenue stream from SaaS offerings. So ask all your questions about that, and Scott will answer them today. Scott, thank you so much for joining us. It is a privilege to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's been quite an adventure since we first met you and David, and continue to grow the organization. So looking forward to
it. Has been. And so for those of you who are familiar with the space, you ask questions. Today, Scott will answer them, and we're going to make it a very, very focused session. And to that end, right, a few questions were submitted before today. So Jaren, can you please share one of the questions that came in ahead of time so we can address it? Thank you. Okay, Scott, this question is from Darren. Darren has asked, what has been the hardest part of building a SaaS business at the same time you're running a consulting firm? What has been the most difficult part?
Yeah, so I think there's two things that make it tough. The first is clearly you're dividing your focus. And so half your marketing focus, half of your sales focus, half of your team focus. We actually find that about half of our consulting engagements have anything to do with our software. And the other half is pure, medical affairs, in our case, management consulting, where they're not using our software. And so you're continuing to build IP, you're continuing to build service offerings unrelated to the product, but then you also have the product. I think the second one is maybe more of a personal thing for me than maybe found holistically. But, one of the things that I took really early on from David when we first met him was around right side up thinking, and to start with the customer problem. Well, it is really tempting when you have a hammer to go look for nails. And so if you've invested $1 million in the development of a software platform that you're then out to sell, it takes a lot of discipline to continue to start from the perspective of understanding the client's problems, and then maybe the software helps and maybe it doesn't. But there's a lot of pressure in the system to make sure that it helps, and you need to make sure you still do that in a way where the client knows that you're honest and that you're looking out for their best interests and that you're going to find them the best solution.
Right, and that you're not just trying to fit them or convince them that your solution is exactly what they need. But when you recommend your solution, it's because you actually believe that that's the solution to the problem they're actually facing. Right? Exactly. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Okay, if you're here, Scott is here for you. So ask your questions, type your questions. And in the meantime, we'll go to a second question that was already submitted. Jaren, if you can show that, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. Okay, this question is from Amanda. Amanda said, products seem like the right way to go to build a scalable business. I want to build a software version of what my firm does and start selling it to clients. What's your advice to be successful at this?
Yeah, so I think there's two things there. So the first is the right way to build a scalable business. Yes, when you build something that then 100 people can use without incremental time and effort from you, that is scale. And if your intentions are ever to sell the business, having an asset that is beyond the advice that you give to clients or the manual effort that you need to put in to help them execute has much higher multiples and would put you in a better position for an exit. But when you're first starting in it, I think the first thing is to build a software that your team uses before you build one that you give to other people to use. So when we think about how we started, We were building software for us to be better at servicing the client in the areas that we help them. And we continued to do that so that we could refine it. Even if it's not something we needed to use, we would still use it so that we could make it better, and do that to the point until you find some trusted clients. You say, hey, would you like to use this yourself? And you help them use it. That's phase two. And then eventually you can deploy it broadly, right, where it's more of a pure SaaS, software as a service solution. So I do think that if you build it for you first and build it for your team, practice using it, that's definitely the place to start.
And I imagine that gives you the knowledge of the solution itself, but also it points you to where you can improve it, where it actually adds value. It points you to where you don't need to overbuild it, perhaps, where you can streamline it and all of those good things, right?
Right.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I would imagine sometimes we will think of it in the context of a client and not so much as, okay, let's use it for ourselves first, even if we don't necessarily see it as in the path of our own critical success. So that's very applicable, I think, to most of us, right, who are in consulting as well.
Mm-hmm.
Michael is asking, Scott, how is tracking results and doing planning strategy different for you in SaaS versus regular consulting? What are the difference from a software as a service in tracking and handling costs? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. So first, there are some very traditional SaaS metrics that we didn't know existed when we first started. And you're looking at retention rates, you're looking at utilization, you're looking at the velocity in which you can do development. And so having a comprehensive set of SaaS metrics is important. And you can also start looking at, because you're not selling something different every time, you can look at things more systematically, like customer acquisition costs. You can start to look at funnels, I find, with a little bit more scrutiny than relying on you saying, I don't know what your problem is, let me ask you questions and then maybe we'll solve it. And so I do find those to be a lot better. There's a really good book for anybody looking to get into SaaS, especially as a complement. It's called Software as a Science. It's a take on SaaS. It's by Dan Martell and a number of people on his team. So I do find that I use that a lot. And there's a lot of good things in there about metrics.
Right.
When it comes to cost, by the way, something to keep in mind is to keep your software costs identified and kept very separate in your P&L. Again, if you are looking in the future to ever sell, or if you're going to capitalize any of it, having that separate in your P&L is important. And one of the areas that we find is that we over-indexed at one point towards being pure SaaS. Like, here's software, we're going to give you a CSM, customer success manager, and they're going to go help you use the software. What we found for us is our sweet spot was still providing consulting with the software. And so there's some overlap in those costs related to the service we're providing you with the software. So keep your licensing fees, keep your costs related to the software separate so that you're able to find those later and manage them differently.
Wonderful. Michael, let us know if that helped. For me, it has been very valuable to hear you explain the difference. So thank you. Tom has asked, how does selling a SaaS product differ from selling consulting? I have quite a few ideas from hearing you through the years. Where would you go to first?
So I actually find that when you try to make it different, it actually fails. And so any time that you start with, here's the features and here's the benefits, let me show them all to you, we find, and we tried that for a while. Like, we got all excited about our product and we wanted to show it to everybody. And we found that it wasn't selling quite as well. But when we started with, here's the problem that this software solves, go into the discovery call and to even the demo from the perspective of, here is the problems that we hear in this. Are you having any of these, or are there others? And then saying, I understand, and you can explain it back clearer than they explained it to you. And then say, well, you know what, there's lots of ways of accomplishing this. We do have some software that helps, but let me show you how I help you solve this problem. Bum, bum, bum. And by the way, here's how it shows up in the software afterwards. So, even when we do a demo, I would say 3/4 of our demo is hearing and articulating back the problem. And then, by the way, here's how it looks on software, and here's how you would use it.
Right. So focus always on them. What I heard you say is you're still focused on them. What's their problem? What is the element that will create the most value, the most impact for them? And then you're tracing that back to your software and say, okay, here's the impact the software can create for you. And that's your sales process.
Yep. And you learn, once in a while, you learn about a problem you didn't know you could solve, and then you build it into your roadmap.
Right. And you and I were talking about earlier, before this session even started, about how hearing the problems and say, okay, I've identified this problem. Nowadays, in the last few months, the technology has accelerated to the point where you can have solutions much faster in place, depending on the problems you're hearing.
Yeah, so that goes to Chris's question around who's doing our coding.
Right.
Let me tell you, the world is completely different in the last 6 months. Prior to the last 6 months, we had a large team. We had internal team members supplemented with 6 or 7 contracted team members that would do all of our development. And on top of that, you would have a product manager. And so basically, the way the world worked 6 months ago is that you would have somebody in our consulting space, myself or my partner or one of our consultants, who would understand the customer problems really, really well. And then you would share some of those with a product manager who had a much more deep level of detail thinking than I would have, who would convert those all into business requirements, prioritize them, communicate those to a front-end developer who would say, here's how the thing's going to work, who would communicate it to the back-end developer to create all the databases, who communicated to the API person who would have to say, here's all the data you need above. And then it would get all the way to the end. And then we would look at it and go, well, maybe that's not exactly what I meant. And so you'd have to start that cycle again. Today, our product manager and even our consultants can build 80% of the solution by themselves using Claude Code, Perplexity, Gemini, whichever you prefer. You can get it to 80%. And so the person who best understands the problem can get the solution to 80%, to show it to somebody, to edit it, tweak it, change it. And that means that our reliance on our CTO and on his team has actually gone up, not down. Because while we don't need as much help with all the programming and all the development, what we're finding is that you can get software to 80% in a week, but the last 20%, you may never get to if you don't have that professional.
Right. It's difficult. The last 20% is the difficult to solve problem that you actually need expertise for, that you're happy to pay somebody to sit down and say, okay, now for this is where we add the extra value, or this is what's not evident. This is what takes us to figure out.
Our team now has basically 3 things that they prioritize their time around, and we couldn't do vibe coding without them. So I don't know about all of you, but we're in a very highly regulated industry selling into Fortune 500 companies. Right. There's security reviews, there's standards, there's like a million things. So the 3 things that we rely very heavily on our team for. So first, Some of you might have used Replit or one of the other kind of coding agents to build software before. Our tech team is basically building that for us. So when I go to start a new project, I just type a little code into whichever one of these agents we want to use, and it goes out to our GitHub and it pulls in, here's how we build, here's our standards, here's the platforms we use, here's the security model, here's the branding, here's the UX, here's everything that we've already decided. Work within this. Now, as I'm working, sometimes I break it and say, well, the stuff you told me I should use, it can't do the thing I just asked it to do, and it'll start to brainstorm, but then it escalates it back to them so that they can update our version. So like that's the first, is like the role becomes enabling us as much as it is, or even more so than doing it for us. And then the second half is that when I finish building my thing and I push it up to them, they check it for security, for usability, for that, does it fit within the stack? Is it going to pass all the checks that our clients want? So while they're not doing as much of the hands-on development right away, especially on the newer ideas, they finish it. They make it enterprise grade. They make sure that when we bring it in front of a security review board, that it is going to pass.
Thank you, Scott. Because with that, I think that's a phenomenal wrap up to these 15 minutes. And if they felt like they went by in a second, they did for me. I imagine they did for all of you. We want to pick your brain for hours. Thank you for joining us. 3 things before you leave us all today. First one is, if you want to find out more about Acceleration Point, thank you, Jaren. This is their website, accelerationpoint.com. You can check out what they do and how they do it and learn more about them on their website. Likewise, connect, please, if you want to connect with Scott. His handle is inmedical-excellent. And mine is MI Rios. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to keep that conversation going. We're both happy to connect with you. And the third one is, if you haven't bookmarked the space, if you haven't set it in your calendar, we're here every Monday at 12:15 p.m. Eastern time. Add this event to your calendar. It will bring you to whatever it is. Exactly. Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you, Scott. You're a pleasure to have always. And thank you all for joining. See you next week.
Good to see everyone.
Bye.